In the beginning, when the world was young and humanity was but a fragile spark in the vast darkness, there existed two brothers, Cain and Abel. They were the sons of Adam and Eve, the first humans cast out from the Garden of Eden. Cain, the elder, was a tiller of the soil, while Abel, the younger, was a keeper of sheep. Their lives were simple, yet fraught with the weight of their parents' sin and the ever-present shadow of divine judgment. But beneath the surface of their pastoral existence lay a simmering tension. Cain, proud and ambitious, grew resentful of his brother, whose offerings to God were favored over his own.
Why, God, why? Why do you favor Abel over me? I am so much better than him. This is not fair and it's driving me crazy. You think you can just walk through life untouched, Abel? While the rest of us bleed for every scrap we get? You don't deserve the air you breathe. You don't deserve the life you've been given. And I swear I'll make sure you never take another step in this world.
This resentment festered, fed by whispers of envy and pride, until it erupted in an act of unspeakable violence, the first murder. Chapter 2. The Curse of Cain. When Cain slew Abel, the earth itself recoiled in horror.
Oh no. Brother, I'm so sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen. I never meant to hurt you. What have I done? This is all my fault.
The ground, once fertile and life-giving, trembled beneath the weight of the first murder. Abel's blood, innocent and pure, seeped into the soil, crying out to the heavens for justice. The very fabric of creation seemed to shudder, as if mourning the loss of its first martyr. The air grew heavy, the sky darkened, and a profound silence fell over the lander silence that was soon broken by the voice of God. The Lord's presence descended like a storm, his voice resonating with both sorrow and wrath.
Cain, where is your brother Abel?
I do not know God. Am I my brother's keeper?
Cain, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground, and now you are cursed from this earth. Which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood, because you have murdered him? When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield to you at strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth.
The weight of God's curse fell upon Cain like a crushing stone. The earth, which had once been his source of sustenance and pride, would now reject him. No matter how hard he toiled, the soil would remain barren, refusing to bear fruit for him. He was cast out, not just from his family, but from the very land that had nurtured him. His life as a farmer, a tiller of the soil, was over. He was condemned to a life of rootlessness, forever wandering, forever searching for a place that would never be his. Terror seized Cain as the full implications of his punishment sank in. "My punishment is greater than I can bear," he cried out. "Behold, you have driven me this day from the face of the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." Cain's fear was not unfounded. In those early days of humanity, justice was often swift and brutal. Without the protection of God or community, Cain knew he would be vulnerable to anyone who sought vengeance for Abel's death. But God, in his infinite mercy even in the midst of judgment, offered Cain a measure of protection. "Not so," God declared. "If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold." And with those words, God placed a mark upon Cain, a sigil of divine origin, etched into his flesh. This mark was both a blessing and a curse. It served as a warning to all who might encounter him. To harm Cain was to invite the wrath of God. Yet, it was also a constant reminder of his sin, a brand that set him apart from the rest of humanity. The mark was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It glowed faintly, a spectral light that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of Cain's heartbeat. Some say it was a rune, ancient and incomprehensible, while others claim it was a symbol of Cain's eternal separation from God. Whatever its form, it was unmistakable, a sign that Cain was no longer fully human. He was marked not just by God, but by his own actions, a living testament to the consequences of sin. And so, Cain became a wanderer, an outcast condemned to roam the earth. The mark protected him from the violence of men, but it also ensured that he would never find peace. He was cursed to live in the shadows, forever haunted by the memory of his brother's blood and the weight of God's judgment. The earth itself seemed to reject him. Wherever he walked, the ground grew hard and lifeless, as if mourning the loss of Abel's innocence. Cain's story did not end with his exile. It was only the beginning. His curse became the foundation of a dark legacy, one that would echo through the ages. Chapter 3. The Land of Nod. Cain fled from the presence of the Lord, his heart heavy with guilt and his spirit broken by the weight of his curse. He wandered east of Eden, into a land known as Noda Desolate, forsaken place where the earth was cracked and barren, and the skies seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The sun burned mercilessly during the day, its rays scorching the ground and casting long, jagged shadows. At night, the temperature plummeted, and the cold was so biting that it seemed to seep into the very marrow of his bones. Nod was a land of extremes, a place where life struggled to take root and where the air itself felt heavy with despair. Yet, it was here, in this unforgiving wilderness, that Cain sought to build a new life. He was determined to prove himself, to God, perhaps even to the memory of Abel, that he was more than just a murderer, more than just a cursed wanderer. With his own hands, he began to shape the land, carving out a place where he could exist, if not thrive. He gathered stones and timber, and with a strength born of desperation, he built a city. He named it Enoch, after his firstborn son, a symbol of hope and continuity in a world that had rejected him. Enoch was a city unlike any other. Its walls were high and thick, designed to keep out both the harsh elements and the prying eyes of the outside world. Within its confines, Cain sought to create a semblance of order and civilization. He taught his descendants the skills of farming, building, and crafting, passing on the knowledge he had accumulated over his long life. The city grew, its population swelling with each passing generation, and for a time, it seemed that Cain might find a measure of peace. But the curse was not so easily escaped. The mark upon him, that divine sigil etched into his flesh, burned with a strange, otherworldly energy. It was a constant reminder of his sin, a brand that set him apart from the rest of humanity. And as the years turned to decades, and the decades to centuries, Cain began to notice changes in his body and mind changes that filled him with both awe and dread. He no longer aged as mortals did. The passage of time, which had once marked the lives of those around him, seemed to have no hold over him. His strength grew unnaturally sharp, far surpassing that of any man. His senses became heightened. He could hear the faintest whisper on the wind, see in the darkest of nights, and detect the scent of blood from miles away. Wounds that would have killed a mortal man healed with terrifying speed, leaving no trace of injury behind. Yet these gifts came at a cost. The sunlight, once a source of life and warmth, now scorched his skin, causing it to blister and burn as if touched by fire. He found himself retreating into the shadows, avoiding the day and embracing the night. The thirst that had begun as a faint, nagging sensation turned into an all-consuming hunger that gnawed at his very soul. It was a thirst for something he could not name, something that no amount of water or wine could quench. At first, Cain resisted the urge, horrified by what it might mean, but the hunger was relentless, a constant presence in the back of his mind. It whispered to him in his dreams, tempting him with visions of power and immortality. And then, one fateful night, he succumbed. He attacked a traveller who had strayed too close to the city, draining the man's blood to sate his unholy thirst. The act filled him with both revulsion and a perverse sense of power. He realized then that he was no longer fully human. He had become something else, something monstrous. The people of Enoch began to notice the changes in their patriarch. They whispered among themselves, their fear and suspicion growing with each passing day. Cain, once a symbol of strength and resilience, had become a figure of dread. His eyes, once filled with determination, now glowed with a natural light. His presence, once commanding, now inspired fear. The city that he had built, the legacy he had hoped to create, began to crumble under the weight of his curse. Cain's transformation was complete. He was the first of his kind, a creature of the night who fed on the blood of the living. His strength, speed, and senses far surpassed those of mortals. But he was cursed to live in shadows, forever shunned by the light of day. The mark of God, once a symbol of his punishment, became a symbol of his dark power, a sign that he was both cursed and chosen. As the centuries passed, Cain's legend grew. He became a figure of fear and fascination, a being whispered about in hushed tones around campfires. Some called him a demon, others a fallen angel. But all agreed that he was a creature of immense power and malevolence. His city, Enoch, fell into ruin, its walls crumbling and its people scattered. But Cain endured. a solitary figure in a world that had no place for him. As the years turned into decades, and the decades into centuries, Cain wandered the earth, a solitary figure bound by his curse. The hunger that had once consumed him became a constant companion, a shadow that followed him wherever he went. But over time, he learned to control it, to temper the primal urge with a semblance of discipline. He could not escape the truth of what he had become, a no longer human, but something else entirely. He was a creature of the night, sustained by the blood of the living, a being caught between life and death, cursed with immortality and burdened by an insatiable thirst. Yet, Cain was not content to simply endure his existence. He was a man of intellect and will, and he sought to understand the nature of his curse. He began to experiment with his newfound abilities, pushing the limits of what he could do. He discovered that his strength, speed, and senses were far beyond those of any mortal. He could move silently, like a shadow, and his presence could instill fear in the hearts of men. He could heal from wounds that would have killed a human, and he found that he could manipulate the minds of the weak-willed, bending them to his will. But the most profound discovery came when he realized that his curse could be passed to others. It happened by accident, during a moment of desperation. A mortal woman, dying from a wound inflicted by a wild beast, begged him for salvation.
Cain, my lord, please, I beg of you. I am wounded, my life slipping away with every breath. Heal me through your blood. Let me taste the power of eternity, as you have. I long to walk in your shadow, to be immortal, like you.
Cain, moved by a rare flicker of compassion, offered her his blood. To his astonishment, the woman's wounds healed, and she rose, transformed. Her eyes glowed with the same unnatural light as his, and she shared his thirst for blood. She was no longer human, but a creature like him, a vampire. This revelation changed everything. Cain, who had lived in isolation for so long, saw an opportunity to create companions, beings who could share his immortality and understand his burden. One by one, he began to create others like himself, choosing those who were strong, cunning, or desperate enough to accept his dark gift. These were the first vampires, the children of Cain, bound to him by blood and curse. The first coven. The children of Cain were a diverse group, each bearing the mark of their sire and the weight of their shared curse. They came from different lands and cultures, but they were united by their bond to Cain and their thirst for blood. Together, they formed a secret society, hidden from the eyes of mortals. They called themselves the Nocturne, a name that reflected their existence in the shadows, away from the light of day. Cain, as their progenitor, became their leader, though he ruled more by respect and fear than by desire for power. He established a code to govern their kingdom, a set of laws designed to ensure their survival and secrecy. The first and most sacred rule was that they would feed only when necessary, taking only enough blood to sustain themselves without drawing attention. They would not kill indiscriminately, for Cain knew that such recklessness would lead to their discovery and destruction. The second rule was that they would never reveal their true nature to the world. Mortals were to be kept in ignorance, for their fear and hatred could destroy the Nocturne. The vampires would live among them, blending in, hiding in plain sight. They would be shadows, whispers, legends never more than a story told around a campfire. The third rule was loyalty to the coven. The children of Cain were bound to one another by blood and curse, and betrayal was punishable by death. They were a family, albeit a dark and twisted one, and their survival depended on their unity. The dark gift. As the Nocturne grew, Cain continued to experiment with the limits of his curse. He discovered that the blood of mortals could sustain them, but it also carried a strange, intoxicating power. The blood of the young and strong enhanced their abilities, while the blood of the weak and sickly dulled their senses. He also found that the act of feeding could be used to manipulate mortals, to bind them to his will, or to erase their memories. But the most profound discovery was the creation of new vampires. Cain learned that the process required more than just the sharing of blood. It required a ritual, a dark ceremony that bound the mortal soul to the curse. The fledgling vampire would awaken with heightened senses and abilities, but they would also inherit the hunger and the mark of Cain. It was a gift, but also a burden, and Cain was careful in choosing who would receive it. The Shadow Society. The Nocturne thrived in the shadows. their influence spreading quietly across the world. They built hidden sanctuaries in remote places, ancient forests, forgotten ruins, and underground catacombs. They amassed wealth and knowledge, using their immortality to master the arts, sciences, and occult practices. They became scholars, warriors, and spies, their presence felt but never seen. Yet, despite their power, the children of Cain were not without conflict. The curse that bound them also divided them. Some embraced their dark nature, reveling in their power and feeding without restraint. Others struggled with guilt and sought to live as close to humanity as possible. These differences led to tensions within the coven, and over time, factions began to form. Cain watched these developments with a mixture of pride and concern. He had created a society, but he could not control the hearts and minds of his children. He knew that the Nocturne's survival depended on their unity, but he also knew that the curse he had passed on to them carried the seeds of discord, the eternal burden. As the centuries passed, Cain remained the eternal wanderer, a figure of myth and legend. He was both revered and feared by the children of Cain, a reminder of their origins and their curse. He continued to guide them, but he also distanced himself, knowing that his presence could inspire both loyalty and rebellion. The Nocturne endured, a shadow society hidden from the world, but Cain could not escape the weight of his guilt. He had created a legacy, but it was a legacy born of sin and darkness. He was the first vampire, the father of monsters, and his story was a cautionary tale of the consequences of jealousy, rage, and the rejection of divine grace. And so Cain's curse endures, a shadow that stretches across the centuries. The children of Cain continue to walk the earth, bound by blood and curse, their existence a testament to the darkness that lies within us all. Cain's story is far from over, for as long as the night holds secrets and the shadows hide monsters, his influence will endure. He is a reminder that some curses are forever, and some sins can never be undone.